and this is definitely what it's all about. This is what we pay the money for. Under goose wing, beautiful weather, not another boat in sight. See why they call it blue water sailing, and all is good in the world. It won't necessarily last, but gosh, enjoy it whilst it does. We're here in lovely Greek at the head of the beautiful Helford River and the home of confusion. And here she is, the wonderful Confusion. Welcome on board Confusion. I'd show you around, but she resembles a garden shed on the inside at the moment. And I'm keen to get on with the story. I just met Duncan Skingley, one of the guys who helped me get the boat set up. And he said, tell the truth, so that's what we're going to do. Warts and all, and nothing held back. We pick up the story at 3 a.m. in the morning in the pitch black, coming into Ponta Delgada Marina in the Azores, and after 1,500 miles of sailing, 13 days at sea, wet, exhausted, finally we had arrived, and it really should have been a cause for celebration.
Oh, that's the finish line about here, isn't it? Between that red thing there and I reckon that white thing over there. Beep, beep, beep. It's finished. 1,500 miles.
Things were about to take a turn for the worse, and everything invested up to this point would be at risk. A nightmare was about to unfold. We got to the marina, and it wasn't obvious where we should put the boat, so we sailed around a bit, motored around a bit, and eventually found a slot. There was a lovely group of people who gathered there to welcome us in, and we were wired, like properly wired on adrenaline and without sleep and so on. And I set foot on the pontoon, and I stepped to one side to avoid the group, and I placed my foot into the abyss between the pontoon and the boat. The pontoon narrowed at that point, and I didn't realise. But being so wired, I shot my left arm out and grabbed the guardrail. And at that point, my entire body weight was on my left arm and shoulder. I got back on the pontoon without getting wet, and I felt something rubbing up against my rib cage. I can't describe it. It was just uncomfortable, really. And after I took my shirt off, it's pretty clear that things weren't right. But fortunately, my mate Chris, a veteran of the Clipper race, had flown in to help prepare the boat for the trip back. And instead of taking me to the nearest hostelry, we went to the nearest hospital. And yeah, I waited to see what the diagnosis was. Boat is going beautifully. It's such a wonderful day, and this is what makes it all worthwhile, really. There's miles and miles of horizon, and nothing in sight, just us. So the diagnosis, a couple of doctors took a look at me, and yep, they called in their consultant, and the consultant very kindly turned up at about 4:30 in the morning. And I was in the strange position of lying in bed as he tried to wiggle my arm back into position, but nothing going. So after a dose of morphine, I woke up after a good night's sleep, a couple of hours, had breakfast and a coffee, and I was discharged, all for 120 euros. Wonderful people in the Azores, wonderful people in that hospital. And I was actually relieved to discover that it was a dislocated shoulder and not a break. because a broken arm would have spelt the end of the race. But the next thing was to tell my co-skipper what had happened, and I had de-risked this project because I knew that asking one person to take a month off work was just too much to be relied upon. So I had Mark on the way out, and then he flew back that morning, in fact, and Mel Sharp from A2 Rigging, who set the boat up over the last year or two, was flying in, and I was going to have to tell him that his co-skipper had a dislocated shoulder, and I had no idea what his reaction would be and whether he'd get back on the plane and fly home to Newquay and the dream would be over. Word got around and the race officials kindly came to check on me. I reassured them that everything was okay. But in my heart, I was worried that Mel would not want to do the leg together with me. And so his cheery face appeared at the companionway, and I told him that I had bad news. Now, I should have known what his reaction would be, because Mel is a former Royal Marine, and I think he could have done that trip single-handed under aerial bombardment, let alone without me. And it was music to my ears when he said, well, let's cross the start line and see how it goes. You know, we can always come back if we need to. And this is to introduce Windstan. Windstan is our resident wind vane, a wind pilot, and third crew member, and the only one that doesn't need feeding and doesn't get tired and doesn't complain. So it was music to my ears that Mel was up for it, and we still had a lot of jobs to do and not much time to do them in. But I told Mel and Chris that Mike, an old salty sea dog from Falmouth in his 80s, still living aboard, he told me he'd been to the Azores and that the Pico wines were really good and that we should definitely try them. So we needed no further encouragement, and we had a big celebration that evening, looking forward to the excitement of the return leg. We are rattling along quite nicely under spinnaker, as you can see, and yeah, not a soul in sight, but somewhere ahead of us is the main pack. We have the lowest rated handicap, but we're okay with that. There's some pretty impressive people here, not least the guys on Colmere, another Contessa 32, so we'd love to get somewhere near them, but best opportunity of doing that is probably in the bar. So having a great time. This is an amazing boat. We took a very long route on the way down, and it meant that we were headed by 2 4.7s and a Force 8, but it is something that we know from this beautifully designed boat that it takes it very well and keeps all aboard feeling confident about the challenging conditions. So just wanted to say thank you to the Rogers family for such a wonderful design. It's a British icon, and I'm very fortunate to have owned one, like a Patek Philippe watch. I guess you never really own it, you just look after it for the next owner. So Mike, the sea dog from Falmouth in his 80s, didn't just recommend the Pico wines, he also recommended that we take one of these with us. A rod for the wind pilot. I had no idea what he was talking about, but after a chat with Peter Forthman, the CEO of Wind Pilot, he said, well, the only spare that you might want to consider is a rod. And I thought, well, I know where I can get one of those. Unlikely that we'd need it, but lo and behold, 400 miles out from the Azores, the fraying line that we should have dealt with between the Wind Pilot and the tiller finally snapped. And at the same time, there was a clunk sound, and Mark peered over the transom and declared with a bit of horror in his face that the rod had snapped and that we had 400 miles of hand steering ahead of us. His face was quite a picture when I then emerged from the stores down below with one of these in my hand, saying, "Is this what you need?" And after some discussion about not dropping it into the ocean, Mark, who's a very adept and practical guy, had it in place, and we were back up and running with the wind pilot steering the way. So back to the Azores. Leg 2 was about to start, and we were ready. We said our farewells to Chris. It's pretty sad. He'd been an absolute lifesaver and bonded well with Mel. And the morning of the race, it was a misty day, but I didn't care because we were on the start line and we had every chance of competing and completing the adventure. There'd been a lot of banter the night before in the bar with various legends like Mervyn Wheatley hinting at which direction he might go. And we decided that we would go west this time with about half of the fleet and the other half went east. We got past the first and second day and the shoulder was okay. I was very thankful that I put grab handles everywhere from the deck to the head and back, and that there was plenty of padding so that if you did knock against any of the furniture in here, then you'd be okay. Blue water sailing, there's a reason why they call it that, is absolutely gorgeous out there. And everything was good in the world, and you know, we just hoped that it would last. But unfortunately, things were about to take a turn for the worse.
Day 3 at sea, on the way back, and all is good. Beautiful day, and we're goose winging, as you can see. Bit of a rolling motion, but can't be helped.
Handling lines in the cockpit would be okay, but as the doctor had told me in the Azores, any movement above my shoulder was not a good idea. So hauling down the spinnaker, for example, would be a no-no for me. And that necessity was about to bite us on the bum in a very big way. It's to be remembered that this is a race, and Mel was keen to keep the spinnaker flying at all times. I was a little bit more hesitant. However, we wanted speed, and so the spinnaker was up during the day. We were in pretty big Atlantic swells, and we had winds around the mid-20s, sometimes gusting 28, spinnaker still flying. And it felt like a constant sort of knife-edge operation between avoiding a broach or avoiding a wrap. And so we were half an hour on, half an hour off on occasions with the watches, hand steering and making sure that we didn't run into trouble. But you get tired, and sure enough, we ended up with a wrap, and it turned out to be a terminal wrap. It wasn't so much a wine glass as a conch shell, and we tried everything, putting the motor on, going around in circles, but all that happened is that the wrap seemed to get tighter and tighter. On closer inspection, the snuffer that we loved in bringing the kite down was now colluding with the other lines to keep it firmly stuck to the forestay, and with no way of getting the spinnaker down, we were in trouble. So we did the only thing that we could do at that point, which was to start letting loose some of the lines, and in that process one of the snap shackles failed, and the next thing we knew was the kite was flying like a demented dragon from the masthead. And it was quite a sight, but not the sort of entrance that we had planned on our arrival at Falmouth Harbour. So what were we to do? And we thought about it, and Mel came up with a plan, and we got the mainsail back up, which we'd taken down to motor around, and found a way of getting the Dragon into the lee of the mainsail, and Mel continued his Fred Astaire dance and eventually caught up with his partner and brought her to heel. So all was saved, and the spinnaker, torn in places and bloody in places as well, was safely stored in the V berth, and frankly I was happy to see it there for the rest of the race. The spinnaker rip wasn't the only casualty of that adventure. We also had to do some running repairs. Thankfully Mel's a rigger on the main sheet Traveller, and Mel was absolutely exhausted. He'd spent literally the length of a rugby match dancing with the spinnaker. So it wasn't surprising to see him slump against the guardrail, absolutely exhausted. And I think at that point our sense of humour was probably at its lowest ebb.
Good day sailing today, and some other good things. Saw a turtle and later some dolphins, but in between snapped the bicep tendon, which I've done before, so I know that I can live with it until we get back. But it's just annoying and probably a bit of stupidity on my behalf, stretching to lift something that could have been done a different way. I think I'd learned by now, but there we go. All part of the big experience.
The wind pilot was doing well, steering us, and I looked over the transom at some point and I saw that the line that connects the blade to the guardrail had come loose and was trailing behind us. What I should have done was grab the boat hook, but that was buried under fenders in the lazarette. So I reached over and grabbed the blade, and as I pulled it up, it was coming up nicely. A wave took it. My ear was next to my arm, and I just heard the sound of a zip wire and a pain in my arm. And what I realized is that I'd snapped the distal tendon that holds the bicep to your forearm. Now, it was a bit of a shocking thing, and my immediate reaction was to apologize to Mel, because my muscle had sort of rolled up the arm like Popeye, and the last thing that he needed was somebody with a left shoulder problem to get then a right bicep problem. But it happened to me before playing rugby, hyperextending again, and so I knew that it wasn't an emergency. And I consulted with Mel. He was pretty sure that there was no bus service that would take us back the 400 or 500 miles to the Azores, and so we would press on.
Our first landfall was the Isles of Scilly, and I remember thinking, good, we're nearly home, which was a clear sign of how far I'd come in my personal journey, because 2.5 years before the AZAB, it was the Isles of Scilly that seemed a distant horizon. As we neared the Lizard, I had an incredible feeling of triumph, really. That sight, the Lizard, which often strikes fear into the heart of sailors, was such a welcoming sight for me. My heart was bursting in my chest as we came past the manacles, leaving it to our port side, and to know that we were very, very close to the finish line and back home to Cornwall, it was just incredible. We approached the finish line with the sound of sea shanties, Royal Marine Military Band, and This Is My Cornwall blaring out through the speakers. And I think at that point, both of us were welling up. And then magically, Mel's family came out to welcome him across the line. Mel sent me up to the bow to record the exact time that we crossed the finish line. We crossed the line with a very respectable time of 9 days, 3 hours and 16 minutes.
That was some of the highs and lows of my Azores and back race, the AZAB 2023. And some of you may be wondering, was it all worthwhile? And the answer to that is categorically it was. A quote that has been at the back of my mind for some time is Mark Twain's quote about the things that you'll regret 20 years from now are the things that you don't do, not the things that you do. So slip your lines, leave for safe harbour, explore, dream and discover.